It's the winter of 1971. In East Pakistan, a humanitarian crisis is spiraling out of control. Millions are fleeing to India, and the region is on the brink of war. Meanwhile, across the globe in Washington, D.C., the US is crafting a secret plan to support one side, and if you thought that side was India, think again. Days later, the USS Enterprise is sent steaming toward the Bay of Bengal in a show of force. That moment wasn't just a diplomatic snub, it was a clear betrayal. Fast forward to today. India and the US are shaking hands, inking deals, and holding joint military exercises. It looks like a perfect alliance on the surface, but history has a way of repeating itself. Could this partnership hold hidden dangers for India, just like in 1971? The United States has been known as the global superpower for decades, but only recently, it has become an increasingly relevant partner of India. At first glance, such a partnership looks like a great fit, strategically. A US-India alliance to thwart China's expansionist policies in Asia? Sure, why not? But beneath the smiles and staged ceremonies is a much more complicated narrative. Is it possible that the US, the country that India regards as its trustworthy friend, may prove out to be a far more long-term danger than China? Today, we are going to answer these questions. But before we do so, please remember to like and subscribe. As a small channel, this goes a long way in terms of support. Now, back to the video. India and the USA have become really well-bonded partners. From agreeing on military cooperation, extensive trade deals to forming defense cooperation, it seems they are stretching their arms further out for each other. India seems to be rising against the odds in the global order, but the adventure is far from over. And at this critical juncture, the last thing India needs is a partner whose support comes with hidden strings. Yet, when you peel back the layers, the US has a history of doing exactly that, leveraging its alliances for its own gain. What is one fetish that the US has? Exporting arms. America is not only the #1 exporter of weapons, it is basically a global business that makes over $238 billion in arms sales a year as of 2023. Quite a strategy if you ask me. But this goes beyond just commerce. The United States does more than simply make money by exporting arms. It makes sure that the defense policies of various countries are in line with theirs. Take Ukraine, for example. The United States came out in full support of Kiev with military aid amounting to $64 billion when the Russia and Ukraine conflict escalated. Quite a bit, isn't it? But the problem is that now Ukraine's security is coupled with the interests of Washington. If India was in a similar situation of dependence, what would that do to India's strategic autonomy? The US has never been shy about meddling in other nations' affairs, especially when its dominance is challenged. It's in the DNA of the US to destabilize foreign governments. The US has a track record of intervening in nations that dare to challenge its dominance. And no, these aren't ancient stories from dusty history books. They're real events with real consequences. In 1953, the CIA orchestrated a coup in Iran, toppling the democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, simply because he nationalized Iran's oil. Fast forward to 1973, and the US backed a coup in Chile, overthrowing President Salvador Allende. In both cases, the US installed regimes that aligned with its interests, often at the expense of democracy and human rights. Can India ever be put at the receiving end of such tactics? Yes, although it is not an easy target. But the US has shown time and time again that it does not think twice about breaking an ally when it is in its interests. Again, a matter of concern, right? Well, this is where it starts getting personal. The US has military bases in around 80 countries, and the total number adds up to be 750. And there is now talk about the possibility of a base being placed on Bangladeshi St. Martin's Island, which is very near to India's naval base in Bay of Bengal. This is not simply a geographical relocation, but rather a repositioning that could enable Washington to keep a close eye on India's military operations from a front row seat. When it comes to India, its foreign policy is largely built about not being too dependent upon a single power. However, with the US base coming into Bangladesh, this balance could change, and this would slowly start to impact India's unilateral ability to undertake any action. Now, let's explore one of the most contentious, and that's certainly an understatement, issues lying on the table: Khalistan. Gurpatwant Singh Panun, a leading Khalistan campaigner, maintains a high-profile opposition to India's unity from the USA. And let's not forget David Headley, one of the key conspirators of the 2008 Mumbai attacks, who is protected by the USA from being extradited. These actions are not just punches. There is immense disconnect with respect to India's security concerns. Most recently, the US supported Canada in its claims against India over the assassination of a Khalistani separatist in Canada. Was it a question of justice, or was it a subtle threat to India? These events demonstrate a hypocritical double standard. The USA has a policy of selectively siding with whatever is in their interests at the time. And this is not the only time it happened. India has felt the sting of US betrayal before. In India's Indo-Pak War of 1971, while the Indian forces were making efforts to contain the humanitarian crisis in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, the United States extended its support to Pakistan against India. Economic and military counsel to Pakistan was necessary in order to nurture their growing partnership with China. The ultimate insult came when Washington mobilized the USS Enterprise to the Bay of Bengal as an intimidation tactic against India. India's increasing dependence on the American defense systems is worrying as well. The 2018 Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement, COMCASA, type agreements facilitate cutting-edge technology access, but in return, there is a condition. America controls essential communication systems. What happens if diplomatic ties sour? Could the US use this dependency to twist India's arm? It's a possibility India can't afford to ignore. Let's look at the issue from the economic viewpoint as well. India's participation in BRICS and its quest for a multipolar world is a direct challenge to the prevailing dominance of the United States. Any thought of a BRICS currency or an alternative to the dollar gets Washington hot under the collar. Is it possible for the US to resurrect the Khalistan issue or resort to some other political diplomatic pressure to bring India back into the fold? It's a subtle thing, but very effective. So, where does this leave India? Does it spell an end to India's relationship with the US? Certainly not. The US continues to be a crucial partner in numerous areas including technology, defense, and trade. However, India has to consider this relationship with respect to the challenges of great power politics. Yes, the US has its own set of interests, and these will not always coincide with those of India. For India to become a global superpower, it is critical that it preserves its sovereignty, politically, economically, and militarily. That means accepting alliances, but not endorsing commitments which will undermine its independence. It is a difficult tightrope to walk, but one which has to be done in order for India to develop in the long term. In conclusion, India's evolving relationship with the United States is both an opportunity and a challenge. On the surface, this partnership appears strong, marked by defense agreements, technological collaboration, and strategic alignment against common adversaries like China. However, as history teaches us, alliances with superpowers often come with hidden strings attached. The US has a documented history of prioritizing its own interests, sometimes at the expense of its allies, as seen in the 1971 Indo-Pak War and other global interventions. India must tread cautiously, particularly given the United States' penchant for leveraging arms exports, military bases, and diplomatic maneuvers to maintain its global dominance. Issues like the Khalistan controversy and the potential for US military bases near India's strategic locations highlight the risks of over-reliance on a partner with a track record of unpredictability. At the same time, India's aspirations for a multipolar world and its leadership in BRICS signal a desire to maintain strategic autonomy. Balancing this ambition with a pragmatic relationship with the US is no easy feat. The key lies in forging partnerships that strengthen India's sovereignty, politically, economically, and militarily, while steering clear of dependencies that could compromise its independence. Ultimately, the question remains: can India navigate the complexities of great power politics without jeopardizing its long-term goals? The US may be a vital partner, but it is not an infallible one. Vigilance and self-reliance must guide India's strategy as it charts its path to global prominence. If you found this analysis insightful, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into global affairs.